The Chinese economy is crashing. Youth unemployment has soared above 20%. The real estate market is in freefall. Deflation is creeping in, and the so-called factory of the world is slowly grinding to a halt. The big question is, how did they get here? The Chinese economy's collapse is far worse than you think, and it's no longer a secret. Local governments, burdened by trillions in hidden debt, are cutting back on services. The government has stopped publishing the numbers on youth unemployment. What's going on behind the polished headlines? Why is China hiding key economic data? To understand what's happening, let's start with the cracks in the numbers they don't want anyone to see. On paper, China's economy appears to be recovering. Official reports show second quarter GDP growth of 5.2%, with headlines around the world repeating that number as a sign of resilience.
China's GDP expanded 5.2% in April to June quarter from a year prior.
Industrial production rose 6.8% in June, and retail sales were up by 4.8%. Plus, the government announced that the unemployment data is stable. However, behind those polished figures, warning signs are piling up. Analysts note that much of the growth is being driven by short-term boosts, such as front-loaded exports, rather than sustainable consumer demand. Fixed asset investments grew by just 2.8% in the first half of the year, and property investment continued its steep decline, down over 11%. At the same time, China's manufacturing sector is under pressure. The official PMI slipped to 49.3 in July, its fourth straight month in contraction territory, signaling shrinking factory activity. Retail momentum is also fading, and household confidence remains weak. Some international economists suggest that the headline growth numbers are masking deeper structural problems. There are growing concerns about transparency. In 2023, for example, the government stopped publishing youth unemployment statistics after the rate hit a record 21.3%. When data reporting resumed months later under a new methodology, the reported figure dropped to 14.9%. However, it excluded millions of students, raising doubts about its accuracy. On the surface, official transport statistics show rail freight is normal. However, independent and anecdotal evidence shows serious strain. Rail cargo volumes have reportedly dropped to levels not seen since the early COVID-19 lockdowns. In central logistics zones, some major terminals appear to be operating at roughly half capacity. Videos briefly posted on social media have showed empty freight yards and idle cranes, then were deleted. Yet government data still reports normal seasonal variation. That gap between what's happening and what's shown suggests built-in data smoothing. There are also claims of provincial memos directing local officials to report performance-adjusted employment. This means that some categories of the jobless are not accounted for anymore. Graduates without work aren't included in the official unemployment rate. Migrant workers who left cities during the pandemic are also excluded. The final numbers look clean and stable, but only because the mess has been swept out of sight. Interestingly, the false data is only the surface. The deeper problem is in the empty streets and silent neighborhoods. Across China, local officials have allegedly launched simulation programs to create the illusion of economic activity. In some places, civil servants are paid to sit in cafes or malls to pretend they're customers. Some malls offer vouchers to people who buy things only to return them later. It's like a pumpkin economy playing out in real time. Leaked drone footage from a former real estate inspector shows spotless shopping centers in Hunan, Fujian, and Liaoning provinces. The lights are on, music plays over speakers, but the malls are empty. To avoid embarrassments during inspections, some operators allegedly hire temporary workers to act as cashiers and shoppers. Fake foot traffic data is speculatively fed into provincial dashboards to make retail look stronger than it is. One user on Weibo posted a video, later deleted, showing himself walking through 10 stores without seeing a single staff member. In Hengyang, the surreal nature of China's economic simulation has allegedly taken on new extremes. A video clip, which reportedly went viral for a brief period before being removed, showed a uniformed security guard walking a specific route multiple times, changing outfits each time to appear as a different person. The video was an example of what insiders call persona cycling. Some call it a deliberate tool employed by local government to create the illusion that targets set by Beijing are being met. The goal is to maintain the appearance of growth even when the numbers aren't real. Whereas it's cheaper to simulate growth than risk an economic collapse in the public eye, as long as the performance continues, the illusion holds. However, while empty buildings can be staged, a deteriorating financial system can't be faked for long. In late July 2022, a quiet crisis began in rural banks. On July 27th, specifically, residents of a small town in Jiangxi province arrived at their local rural bank to find it locked early with no explanation except a handwritten sign saying, "System maintenance, please return tomorrow." The next morning, more banks across the province followed suit. Word spread quickly on social media, keywords were censored, comments vanished, and links broke. Behind the scenes, a larger issue was unfolding. Leaked internal documents from the People's Bank of China, PBOC, revealed that withdrawals from rural banks had been restricted across several provinces, including Jiangxi, Anhui, and Gansu. The official reason given was to prevent fraudulent transfers, but insiders allegedly revealed that the more urgent problem was liquidity shortages. Some regional banks simply didn't have enough cash to survive another demand spike. As tighter withdrawal controls were imposed, suspicions grew, and people rushed to withdraw what little they had left. Screenshots of frozen digital wallets, failed withdrawal attempts, and declined card transactions, even for basic groceries, began circulating online. In 2024, the Chinese government quietly stopped publishing youth unemployment data. The official explanation was a vague reference to methodological revisions. However, most people claim that the numbers are being suppressed because they are volatile and threaten to unravel the social fabric. Alleged leaked screenshots from internal Ministry of Human Resources dashboards, shared anonymously on Telegram channels, reveal what was never meant to be seen. The youth unemployment rate stands at 28.4%. That's nearly 1 in every 3 young people in China without a job. And it doesn't even account for those who've stopped looking altogether. In June 2025, China's surveyed unemployment rate remained steady at 5%, the same as the previous month and meeting market expectations. This is the lowest rate since November 2024. The unemployment rate for locally registered workers was 5.1%, while for non-locally registered workers, it was 4.8%. Among the non-locally registered workers, those with non-local agricultural household registration also had a 4.8% unemployment rate. The urban unemployment rate across 31 major cities was also 5%. At the same time, the average weekly working hours for employees in enterprises rose to 48.5 hours. By the end of the second quarter, the migrant rural labor force reached 191.39 million, an increase of 0.7% from the previous year. In the first half of the year, the national unemployment rate averaged 5.2%. Many university graduates are finding themselves in jobs that are far below their qualifications due to the country's struggling economy. One such individual is Sun Jian, a 25-year-old with a master's degree in finance. His dream was to work in investment banking and earn a substantial income. However, despite his efforts, he didn't secure a job in his field and instead took up a position as a waiter in a hotpot restaurant in Nanjing. The economy's downturn has led to a significant mismatch between the number of university graduates and available jobs, especially in sectors such as real estate and manufacturing. Youth unemployment had been close to 20% before the method for calculating it was altered. Many graduates have found themselves taking jobs that do not align with their qualifications, which often leads to criticism from family and friends. The job market for recent graduates in China has deteriorated sharply. Millions of university graduates are struggling to find stable employment and may have to turn to gig work, such as food delivery, sometimes earning just a few yuan per order. These roles have become oversaturated, reflecting limited formal opportunities. Even top-tier graduates, including holders of master's degrees, often find themselves taking gig work to make ends meet. One PhD graduate reportedly ended up working as a delivery rider in Beijing after failing to secure academic or professional employment. Universities have also come under scrutiny for inflating graduate employment figures. After allegations that some colleges were listing fake jobs or using improper categorization, provincial governments directed institutions to verify the authenticity of employment data from graduates categorized as freelancers or self-employed. However, the themes of manufactured growth and data manipulation resonate with verified trends across China's official statistics. In many provinces, the numbers of newly registered companies surged. Meanwhile, allegedly investigative reports have highlighted that a large share of these entities never conducted real business. Some reviewers have reportedly found addresses hosting multiple ghost companies registered under relatives or associates of local officials. These findings suggest attempts to pad growth data. In manufacturing and employment reporting, officials have sometimes reclassified short-term contracts or returning workers as full-time employees, inflating job creation figures. This practice has been documented in case studies and economic analysis of local employment records. Exports figures have occasionally been questioned for round-tripping, where goods are sent out and returned under the same records. However, actual evidence is limited to a small number of reported irregularities. On paper, exports and investment figures may shine, but the reality behind them is strange. Cases uncovered since 2022 show that some companies allegedly use false VAT invoices to inflate export numbers and claim tax rebates. The customs and tax authorities identified sophisticated schemes involving non-existent goods, phantom export documentation, and invoices disconnected from actual shipments. Similarly, local governments historically relied heavily on land sales for revenue, sometimes counting them directly as fixed asset investment. In smaller cities, this reliance allowed provinces to record immediate revenue even if buyers defaulted or lands lay idle. Analysts warn that such land sale revenue accounting has been used to prop up GDP and sustain local budgets long after the real estate collapse began. Many local regions still depend on off-budget LGFV borrowing and land finance to keep growth alive, even as overall land sales decline to multi-year lows, especially in 3rd, 4th, and 5th-tier cities across 2025. Furthermore, an IMF-cited study estimates that local government debt, including contingent liabilities via LGFVs, ranges between $7 trillion and $11 trillion, with roughly $800 billion at high risk of default. Foreign companies are quietly pulling capital out of China, and fast. In 2024, net foreign direct investment, FDI, dropped by $168 billion, marking the largest outflow on record and far exceeding new investment levels. The decline continued into early 2025. From January to May, FDI fell 13.2% year-over-year to 358.2 billion yuan, which is $50 billion. China, like Japan in the past, is facing a massive real estate bubble that could burst, and it might be worse than Japan's. China currently has between 65 and 80 million empty homes across the country. If the economy slows significantly, more people could rush to sell their properties. House prices have already been falling for several years, but a sharp drop could happen if mass selling begins. For now, China's economy remains somewhat stable. However, if the yuan becomes significantly overvalued against the US dollar and exports slow down, China could enter a severe economic crisis. This downturn could trigger widespread home sales, causing the real estate bubble to burst. The scenario would resemble Japan 2.0, leading to 10, 20, or even 30 years of economic stagnation. The situation could worsen if the US and European Union finalize a free trade agreement with zero tariffs between them. Before Trump's presidency, EU had tariffs on some US goods. If Trump negotiates a zero-tariff deal with the EU and both block Chinese goods with high tariffs, China could lose access to two of its biggest export markets, potentially collapsing its export-driven economy. Before Trump took office, the European Union had many tariffs on US goods. If Trump negotiates a deal with the EU to eliminate all tariffs between the US and Europe, and both impose high tariffs on Chinese products, it could effectively shut China out of its two largest export markets. Together, the US and the EU account for about 30% or more of China's exports. No other market can replace them. China trades with other regions such as Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. Still, the US is the world's largest consumer market, and the EU is the second largest. Losing access to these markets would cost China hundreds of billions, potentially nearly $1 trillion in trade. This loss would end China's long-standing trade surplus and reduce its ability to invest in domestic products and growth. If China also faces a housing crisis, it could destroy the economy entirely. Despite China's retaliatory tariffs, the country is more vulnerable than the US. China strongly seeks a trade deal but fears any agreement that forces it to devalue the dollar or significantly strengthen the yuan. Such a move could cause an economic disaster similar to what Japan experienced decades ago. If that happens, China's economic growth could stall, ending the so-called Chinese miracle. Massive debt, a stagnating property market, and soaring youth unemployment are great contributors to China's collapse. The collapse is shown to be more than just an economic slowdown, but a systemic crisis with long-term consequences for both China and the global economy. What do you think? Let us know in the comments if you enjoyed this video. Please ensure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.